Watering should be the simplest thing in the world, but watering efficiently and effectively requires a little know-how. So let me show you everything you need to keep your plants quenched and your garden thriving. We'll look at when and how to water, what to prioritise, and I'll be sharing some ideas to conserve water and your time. So often we're told to keep plants well watered in dry weather, but what on earth does that actually mean? Well, how you water depends a lot on what you're growing, the stage of its life cycle, and your growing conditions, of course, including temperature, how sunny it is, and your soil type. So let's start with a few priorities. First up are young plants and seedlings, which won't have expansive root systems, making them vulnerable to drying out. So keep these guys really well watered to help them establish. Sandier soils drain through and dry out a lot quicker, so are likely to need watering more often. On the other hand, clayey soils hold on to moisture for longer, but when they do dry out, will take a lot more of a drenching to re-wet. So how do you know when it's time to water? Well, everyone's got a portable moisture checking tool, your finger. Just stick it down into the soil an inch or two deep where the roots are and have a little bit of a feel. Now, if it's cool and damp down there, like it is here, well, there's enough moisture. But obviously if it's dry and dusty, get on and get watering. It's best to water in the morning if you can. The soil will still be cool from the night time and plants can take charge of all that water ahead of the heat of the day. It makes sense for them to stock up on moisture ahead of expected growth. It also means that the soil surface has all day to dry out, so there's less chance for slugs and diseases. But what if you don't have time in the morning? Perhaps you've got to rush to get to work, do the school run, and just don't fancy getting up extra early to fit in your watering beforehand. Well, watering in the evening comes a close second, and that's when I tend to do my watering. Whenever you water, just try to avoid watering during the heat of the day, when the water can quickly evaporate, leaving less for your plants. The saying goes, different strokes for different folks, and it's the same for our crops. Leafy crops like lettuce, cabbage and chard are probably thirstiest of all and need consistent moisture. Heading types of lettuce and cabbage, especially when they're firming up, will need that extra moisture. Potatoes need moisture as the tubers start to form, from about marble size. Other root crops like carrots and parsnips are more self-reliant, but water them before the soil fully dries out so growth remains unchecked. Step up watering of peas and beans the moment they start flowering. Peas and beans need lots of moisture to swell and set those pods, so keeping them nice and moist is really important. Now, French or snap beans are a little more tolerant of drier conditions than runner beans, but climbing varieties of all beans especially really need lots of water, simply because there's an awful lot of foliage to sustain. Alliums like onions and shallots are more tolerant of dry weather, but will establish a lot quicker if they are kept moist when they're younger. Stem veggies like celery or bulb fennel, though, are a lot thirstier, and if they don't get enough moisture, will bolt or flower prematurely, so consistent moisture is a must for those guys. And then we have our fruiting vegetables. Tomatoes, eggplant or aubergine and the like, well, they all need consistent moisture the moment the first fruits form to encourage ongoing production and to avoid problems from inconsistent watering such as split fruits or nutrient deficiencies like blossom end rot. Plants in the squash family are generally thirsty, especially zucchini or courgettes, given their hulking great leaves and the speed with which they pump out their fruits. Sprawling varieties of winter squash and pumpkins, on the other hand, can root as they sprawl, and that'll give them more resources. And they helpfully form their own living mulch as well. As a very general rule of thumb, and I stress general, we're aiming for around an inch or 2.5 centimetres of either rainwater or irrigation water to reach the soil every week, and a bit more than that if it's very hot or dry. You can check how much water is actually reaching the ground by sinking in rain gauges, or for example, leaving lots of shallow trays around marked up to accurately measure water depth. But as discussed, the actual amount varies by crop, so here's a handy table to help. Bear in mind these are ideals, based on a good, well-balanced soil, but it serves as a handy, approximate guide nonetheless. Plants often give visual cues that they are water stressed. Poor growth, for example, sparse foliage or a lack of pods or fruits, is a good sign that plants are struggling. Plants may lack that lovely healthy shine and look a bit lackluster, or the classic, they may be drooping or wilting. Container plants might become very light and easily blow over, and plants that are water stressed are more likely to be susceptible to diseases like powdery mildew, a common disease of peas, beans and squash family plants. Get to know your plants and read the symptoms. As I said, test soil moisture regularly, as some of these symptoms can arise from overwatering, so you want to rule that out before splashing more of the wet stuff. So when it's time to water, what's the best way to do it? Well, for me it means watering nice and deeply down at the ground where the roots are. Overhead sprinklers make me wince because so much of that water is just going to land on the foliage and either evaporate straight away or hang about and raise humidity, which could cause problems with disease. So water at the base of the plants. Get your hose or spout right down in there, trying to avoid wetting the leaves as much as possible. Now this is where water efficient irrigation such as soaker hoses or drip irrigation can come really handy because it keeps the water at ground level, which you can then lock in place with a mulch, and more on that shortly. The mantra little and often is great for so many things, but not watering. In fact, we want the opposite. I like to give the ground a really thorough soaking so the water penetrates down as much as 6 inches or 15 centimetres. That way I know I've got loads of water in there and I won't have to water again for at least a few days. Now you'll notice I'm wetting the leaves of these plants. That's because they're smaller. It's not always possible to keep the leaves completely dry. Now my general technique for watering is to give the area a really thorough water before moving on to the next bed. But then I will come back and do the whole thing all over again. The logic for this is that the first pass softens up the soil, making it more receptive for the second time round when more of that water will get down deep. If I was just to water lightly and merely wet the surface, what I'd do is I'd encourage lots of surface roots, making the plants more dependent on me for regular watering. But by getting this down nice and deeply, what I'm doing is I'm encouraging the roots to travel down in search of the water as the top layers gradually dry out. And the end result is more self-resilient, more reliant plants. Container plants are vulnerable soils because they can't send roots far down and wide, of course, they're contained. Now this is where drip irrigation can come in handy for really thirsty plants like tomatoes. For other plants, I think it's worth clustering pots together because they will cast mutual shade, which can be really helpful on hot days or if you're going away for the weekend, for example. Peat-based mixes do tend to dry out a bit faster than soil-based mixes. So if you've got plants that are in pots for a long time, like my strawberries at the front here, use a soil-based mix which will hold on to moisture for longer. Another option is to add a little bit of water-retaining gel or crystals to your potting mix, and what this will do is swell up to many times its original size, and then it'll release that moisture back into the potting mix as things dry out, evening out the peaks and troughs of very wet and very dry. Watering by hand, if you're doing it properly, can take a lot of time, which is why conserving moisture so it lasts for longer is a savvy move. Now the best way to improve soil so it holds on to moisture for longer in dry weather and also drains better in wet weather is to apply lots of organic matter. Organic matter is just material derived from living beings. Now that could be garden compost, it could be manure, leaf mould, anything like that. Get that onto the soil and that will greatly improve how it performs. Improving the soil like this is a gradual process done over many seasons. I like to add the bulk of my organic matter in winter so it gets incorporated into the soil ready for sowing and planting in spring. Then once the growing season has arrived, it's time to bust open the mulch. Now a mulch is anything that covers the soil, and I like to use more organic matter. Just lay it out over the surface and it creates a barrier between the air and the soil. This slows evaporation from the soil by as much as 70%, while also creating a barrier that makes it harder for weeds to push through. Now lay it about 1 inch or 2 to 3 centimetres thick, and do this after you've watered or after a sustained period of rain to lock in all of that beautiful moisture. Grass clippings make a great summertime mulch, but don't spread them too thickly or they'll kind of mesh into a kind of soggy mess. You can always top them up later once they disappear down into the soil. Sheet mulches are exactly as they sound, water permeable sheets that form a barrier between the soil and the air. Now these are really popular with chunky plants like onions and potatoes or big old squash plants. Woven mulches are popular, but you might want to avoid them because of the plastic they contain. This area here was sheet mulched, and if I scrape back the chippings here, you can see the cardboard just about underneath here. Once I'd laid the cardboard, I cut open slits, folded it back and then planted into the slits there before returning the flaps. And then, because I don't like looking at cardboard, I finished the whole area off with some bark chippings. And remember to harvest as much rainwater as you can. Rainwater is better for our plants, it saves money on metered water, and it avoids those frustrations of a hosepipe ban, which come at just the wrong time. Set up multiple water barrels coming off every roof surface, and the bigger the better. Save water from inside the house too. Catch any water that you wash or cook vegetables in, and then once it's cool, use it to water parched ground or plants. Bath and shower water can be used too, but only if you use ecologically sound products, and then only around non-edibles like flower and shrub borders. Don't forget to keep yourself well hydrated too. We don't want you withering away. I'll catch you next time.